snow drifted across the narrow city street like a quiet confession, settling on worn boots and the thin coats of two trembling twin girls who walked on either side of Lina Ross, clutching her hands as though she were the only solid truth they had left. The winter morning carried a blue-gray stillness, the kind that presses gently on the ribs, urging breath to slow. Lina felt that heaviness in her bones, but she straightened her back anyway, because Mira and Nora always looked to her first, 7-year-old mirrors of fear and hope, both wrapped in mismatched scarves she had knitted from leftover yarn. Their cheeks were pink from cold, their silence from habit. People rarely noticed them, and when they did, it was never with softness. A vendor stacking crates of apples glanced at the trio and immediately shook his head. "Not today," he muttered, as if their very presence were a request. Lina didn't argue. She simply nodded, thanked him, and moved on, keeping her voice warm for the girl's sake. But inside, the rejection stung in the familiar place where worry lived, a place that always asked whether she could truly give these children enough. The twins pressed closer, their breaths fogging into the same thin cloud, their footsteps quiet on the icy pavement. The city felt impossibly large around them, tall buildings rising like indifferent giants, lights flickering behind windows where families prepared warm breakfasts. Lina pretended not to imagine such lives. When they turned the corner toward the old market square, Mira tugged her hand. "Look," she whispered, her voice a fragile feather. Nora leaned around her, eyes widening. At first, Lina saw only the storm-thick air and the blur of commuters. But then, under a dark umbrella, a man knelt beside a soaked stray dog, cupping the creature's shivering muzzle with gentle palms. The sight struck through the cold like a lamp being lit. He wasn't dressed like anyone who should be kneeling on snowy pavement, a deep charcoal overcoat, tailored gloves, shoes polished even in winter. His face, sharp, composed, unreadable, softened as he fed the starving dog half of a croissant he must have been carrying for himself. The twins froze, mesmerized. "Uncle, are you a saint?" Mira whispered aloud before Lina could hush her, and the man looked up at the sound. His eyes were not cold like his expensive attire might suggest. They held something quieter, something searching. The dog nudged his hand once more before curling into the shelter of a nearby awning, leaving the man studying the three of them with a strange mixture of curiosity and recognition. Lina's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. She tried to hurry the girls along, but the man rose, closing his umbrella, snow collecting in his dark hair like scattered starlight. "Are you three all right?" he asked, not with pity, but with a restrained gentleness, as though he feared startling them. His voice carried the low steadiness of someone who rarely wasted words. Lina nodded quickly, offering a polite smile. "We're fine." The girls just noticed kindness. The twins peeked up at him shyly, their small faces pale against the morning chill. He studied them for a moment, then gestured toward the cafe just across the street, a warm glow shining through frosted windows. "It's freezing. Let me get you something warm." Lina opened her mouth to refuse. People with wealth rarely offered kindness without expectation. But the twins looked at her with such bright, pleading eyes that her protest faltered. She gave a small nod, and the man's expression softened, as if he'd been holding his breath. Inside the cafe, warmth wrapped around them like a woolen blanket. The lights were a soft amber, casting gentle halos on the wooden tables. The scent of baked bread drifted from the kitchen, mingling with the sweetness of cocoa. The man ushered them to a booth by the window, then ordered breakfast for all four of them without fanfare: oatmeal for the girls, black tea for himself, a cup of coffee with honey for Lina. She blinked at the small kindness. Honey felt extravagant. The twins held their mugs of cocoa with both hands, watching the steam with awe, as though heat itself were a miracle. The man observed them quietly, something unreadable flickering across his gaze. "My name is Elias Thorne," he said at last. The name tugged at Lina's memory. She had seen it on billboards: CEO of Thorne and Vale Industries. Untouchably wealthy. A man who lived in glossy headlines, not in cramped cafes with people like them. Lina introduced herself and the girls, though the twins were too busy sipping cocoa to say more than a timid hello. Elias's lips curved the faintest bit at their shyness. "They're very polite," he murmured. "Not everyone their age is." Lina brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, unsure how to respond. She didn't want gratitude to look like desperation. But watching the twins' faces soften after such a cold morning made her throat ache. As their simple breakfast arrived, Elias leaned back slightly, studying Lina with quiet attention. "How do you know them?" he asked, not as an interrogation, but as an invitation. Lina hesitated, fingers tightening around her cup. She rarely spoke of the past. Words made things too real. But his tone was steady, almost safe. So she told him carefully, with no theatrics, how she had begun volunteering at a shelter after losing her own job, how the twins had been left on the steps one stormy night, how their tiny hands had clung to her coat like anchors against the dark. "I couldn't leave them," she said. "I didn't want to." Elias didn't interrupt. His gaze held stillness, absorbing every detail. "You've done something extraordinary," he said softly. "Most people talk about compassion. You acted on it." Lina lowered her eyes, flustered. Praise never sat comfortably with her. It highlighted every fear she carried. But the twins leaned against her shoulders, warm and content, and for a moment the world felt gentler. The emotional quiet between them settled like a new blanket of snow outside. Nora traced a heart on the fog window. Mira pointed out a passerby carrying too many parcels. Elias watched them with a faint wonder of someone discovering something he had been missing for years. "My sister wanted to adopt," he said after a long silence. "She never got the chance. She would have liked them." The grief in his voice was soft, not sharp, the kind that had been carried long enough to lose its edges. The twins reached out instinctively, tiny hands resting on his sleeve. He looked startled, then deeply moved. Something shifted in the air then. 3 small threads weaving between the 4 of them. Fragile, but real. But the warmth cracked a little when Lina noticed how easily the twins gravitated toward him. Attachment was dangerous. Wealthy people could vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving deeper wounds in their place. She straightened, gently pulling the girls closer. Elias noticed the shift instantly, and misunderstanding flickered across his features. Hurt hidden beneath restraint. "I didn't mean to overstep," he murmured, withdrawing his hand. Lina forced a smile. "You didn't. I just need to be careful." Her voice trembled despite her efforts. Outside, the snow thickened, dulling the world into muted grays once more. Elias glanced toward the window, jaw tense, as though he were recalibrating something inside himself. The cafe felt smaller now, the fragile warmth fading into a quiet uncertainty neither of them knew how to bridge. Mira leaned close to Lina's ear, whispering, "Why did he get sad?" But Lina had no answer. She simply watched Elias rise slowly, slipping on his gloves, his composure restored, but his eyes holding a disappointment he tried to hide. And when he spoke, "Thank you for letting me sit with you," his voice carried the unmistakable ache of someone who feared he had been welcomed for a moment, only to be gently pushed away again. A moment later, the door chimed softly behind him, the cold rushing in like an unfinished question. Lina remained seated long after Elias stepped into the snowfall, her hands motionless around the half-empty cup of coffee that had lost its heat. The twins watched the closed door with anxious, flickering eyes, unsure why the warmth of moments ago had dissolved so quickly into something tight and unfamiliar. Snow kept drifting past the window, thickening against the glass, as if trying to hide the path Elias had taken. Lina felt a knot coil inside her, fear, regret, guilt, all mixed into something she could not name. She had tried to protect the girls, but in doing so, she had wounded someone who had shown them nothing but kindness. "We made him sad," Mira whispered, and her small voice cracked Lina's composure. Nora tugged Lina's sleeve, asking with equal worry, "Will he ever come back?" Lina pressed a gentle kiss to each forehead, offering a smile she didn't truly feel. "Let's get going, sweethearts," she murmured, though her chest ached with the weight of what she wasn't saying. The cafe's warmth no longer soothed. It only reminded her of her misstep. She gathered the twin scarves, buttoned their coats, and led them outside into the cold that seemed sharper than before. The streets felt different now, as though she were retracing each step with a new awareness of what she had pushed away. The twins' fingers tightened around hers, but even their small warmth did not steady her. She kept replaying the brief flicker of hurt in Elias's eyes, a hurt he had tried to hide beneath composure. She hadn't meant to reject him. She had only meant to keep the girls safe from loss. But fear, she realized, can sometimes create the very loneliness it hopes to avoid. They walked toward the shelter district, past shuttered shops and windows fogged by families inside. Lina's chest tightened with each passing house, each faint glow behind curtains. She had learned long ago not to look too closely at what she wished for. Longing had a way of bruising what little hope she carried. But today, for the first time in years, longing had a face, Elias's, and the bruise felt deeper. Mira paused suddenly. "He won't know where we live," she said with a quivering lip. "He won't find us." Nora nodded solemnly, as though this were the greatest tragedy she could imagine. Lina crouched beside them, gathering both girls into her arms. "Kind people don't disappear forever," she whispered. But even as she spoke, she wondered if that conviction belonged in the realm of fairy tales. They reached the old market square again. The same vendor from earlier glanced at them, opening his mouth as if to dismiss them once more, but then hesitated. Elias's earlier act of compassion had shifted the energy of the space in ways Lina hadn't noticed before. The vendor simply nodded instead, leaving them to pass without remark. Yet Lina felt no victory. The girls' shoulders drooped. Their eyes kept sweeping the street, searching for a familiar figure that didn't appear. But one truth remained. The world is larger than any moment of regret, and sometimes kindness circles back when least expected. On the far edge of the market, where snow gathered thickest, Lina felt a prickle of awareness before she saw him. Elias stood across the square, one gloved hand in his coat pocket, his breath rising like pale smoke. He seemed uncertain, unsure if he was welcome, unsure if he should approach. The twins gasped softly, and without waiting for permission, they ran through the slush toward him. Lina's heart clenched as she called after them, but the girls reached Elias before she could. Nora threw her arms around him first, Mira following, their tiny bodies clinging like frozen birds seeking shelter. Elias bent to them instinctively, surprise flashing across his face before softening into something deeper. Relief, vulnerability, a quiet, answering warmth he had not expected to feel. "You came back," Mira murmured into his coat. Elias looked up at Lina then, standing several paces behind, snow caught in her lashes like tiny shards of moonlight. "I wasn't sure I should," he admitted gently, brushing the snow from the girl's hair. "I didn't want to make you uncomfortable or intrude." His voice held no accusation, only sincerity. But the sincerity was enough to make Lina's throat tighten. "You weren't intruding," she said, stepping closer. The words trembled free of her guarded calm. "I just didn't want the girls to get attached to someone who might walk away. I know that isn't fair to you. I'm sorry." Her gaze dropped to the twins, gripping his coat. "They've lost too much already." Elias studied her for a long, quiet moment. Snowflakes melted along the collar of his coat, glinting like tiny fallen stars. "I'm not here to take them from you," he said softly, "or to replace you. I just wanted to know them, and to know you, without fear chasing us away from every step." There was sincerity in his tone that felt like a slow exhale against her heart. The twins looked between the adults, sensing the weight of the unspoken. Then Mira tugged Elias's hand. "Uncle," she said with a fragile certainty, "can we be a family?" The word hung in the cold air, soft but formidable, the kind of word that can shatter loneliness if allowed. Elias knelt so he was eye level with them. "Family is something built slowly," he said, brushing a stray curl from Nora's cheek. "But if Lina agrees, I would like to try." The warmth in his voice was so gentle it hurt. Lina pressed a hand over her trembling mouth. This was not the loud, dramatic plea of a man trying to impress. This was someone offering space in his heart, careful not to take what wasn't his. She exhaled slowly, realizing that the fear she had clung to was not protection. It was a wall keeping them all from the warmth they needed. She stepped forward, her boots sinking into the snow. "Yes," she whispered. "We can try." Elias's eyes softened, the tension in his shoulders easing as though a long-standing burden had melted away. The twins squealed with joy, hugging him again with fierce affection. And this time Lina did not pull them back. Instead, she let herself feel the moment. The warmth of connection blooming even in the freezing air, the soft echo of hope reshaping the corners of her weary heart. Elias stood, brushing snow from the girls' coats. "There's somewhere I'd like to take you," he said, glancing at Lina as though seeking permission. She nodded. They walked together, Lina on one side of the twins, Elias on the other, forming a fragile line of togetherness that felt new and somehow inevitable. He led them through quieter streets until they reached a townhouse bathed in the warm glow of evening lamps. Tall windows, framed by velvet drapes, hinted at life within. The wreath on the door had dried lavender woven through it. "This was my sister's home," Elias said softly. "I've kept it, but it's been empty for too long." The moment they stepped inside, warmth wrapped around them. The scent of baked bread, the soft creak of polished wooden floors, the flicker of candlelight reflecting in gold patterns along the hallway. Mira breathed out in awe. Nora tugged Lina's sleeve. Elias watched the girls explore with quiet emotion, as if seeing the house awakening through their presence. He turned to Lina. "This isn't charity," he murmured. "It's an offering. A place to rest. A place to belong, if you want it." Lina felt the words settle into her like light seeping through cracks long sealed shut. She nodded slowly, tears warming the corners of her eyes. Later, they gathered around a small dining table. The twins laughed softly as they tasted warm bread and honey, making the room feel more alive than it had in years. Elias sat beside them, not dominating the moment, simply sharing it with reverent sincerity. As night settled outside, Lina looked at the man across from her, the man who had knelt for a stray dog, who had offered warmth without conditions, who had waited for permission to step closer. The grief he carried had softened into something new, something hopeful. She realized, with quiet astonishment, that this was no longer a story of chance meeting, but of chosen connection. The twins leaned their tired heads on their shoulders, heavy with trust. Elias rose to dim the lights, leaving only a soft golden glow. Snow continued falling beyond the windows, but inside the house the world felt wrapped in peace. Lina whispered, "Thank you for coming back." Elias looked at her, eyes warm. "Thank you for letting me." And as the candlelight flickered, the four of them, no longer strangers, not yet a perfect family, but something beautifully forming, sat within the tender quiet of a home that finally felt lived in again.